All right, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup, see that big old hole that I cut, and again just did flat, straight angles for the most part in order to make filling it in easier. I got some notes there as far as how far I had to go with everything. After getting everything assembled, that's kind of where things are setting. What I ended up doing here, so this is where the box for the heater pulls in the air. There's a little box underneath this spot here, and this was sticking down a lot further, and you could see what I ended up doing there is I just cut it on the side, and what I'm going to do is I'll just bend this up and then I'll weld all along that seam in order to get that area closed off. I'll be left with little triangles there on the end that I can fill those in pretty easily. And then I made a bunch of notes on the inside. I just got marks all over the place for what the measurements will be. I'm gonna end up filling in a little bit so I get a bit more footwell space. There ain't much I can do here where the pedals are at, but right here where your knees will be, making notes where I can actually squeeze that in a little bit and gain a bit more space. On the passenger side, I'll be able to gain about 3 inches of footwell space on that side. So I'll be able to gain a little bit of space around in here. It's a tiny little truck, so every little bit counts. Got some notes up here as well as far as what measurements are in order to measure the height of the transmission and bell housing and everything, so I know how big to make the tunnel. And so that's where we set with that. But one thing that sucks big time is the motor mounts are off of it. As you can see, what I was trying to do is yank the engine in order to make welding in all that stuff easier, cleaning it and everything. And the motor won't come out because you can see, and it's obvious now, but I didn't notice it. Those motor mounts come out at a pretty steep angle, and they end up catching on the bottom edge of the engine. So right down there, they end up catching. And so they are too long. And there ain't really anything I can do about that. I can't hardly kick out this motor mount that I got. So, I think some sort of crazy solution, would be to re-engineer this whole thing, cut it all apart, get it to stand away from this plate a bit more. But then, that screws up all the angles. Everything I did in order to get all the angles true and plumb and everything like that, it just screwed it all up. So what I think I'll end up having to do is, I'll have to pick a spot, because you can see it would end up getting even worse as I try to yank this out of here. That pan sticks out as well, and I sure as hell don't want to be in a spot that every time I yank the engine I got to take the pan off. That'd be stupid. And so there ain't much room. There's a couple inches on that side, about the same over here, but when that gets starting to get pulled up, that space shrinks up pretty quick. So what I think I'm going to end up doing is I'll cut the motor mount that I made right here at like an angle, and then I'll keep that top piece, and then I'll continue to bolt to the part that bolts to the engine, the round piece, and then I'll flatten this off and then plate it across, and then I'll be able to just drop it down and then basically lose this much of the motor mount, and it'll flatten and box it and put some bolts through it and everything, and basically make it a 2-piece motor mount. So instead of it just being those 2 long pieces there, it'll settle down into a couple of bolt holes, and then those will screw down. So this sucks, just the nature of the beast. Same sort of thing when I, was reassembling all the pieces parts that go on here and making sure that I had enough room for all that stuff. Like, I'm trying to keep myself from having an absolute maintenance nightmare because I am planning on keeping this thing for a while. So, yeah, I'm glad I did it. Honestly, I'm glad I yanked it now before I started like putting in that firewall. And then, have one more thing that I'm going to be banging around and, making a mess. So it's going to screw up some stuff for sure. Like I got some shims and crap down there at the bottom in order to hold it up. And, I'm going to have to redo all them angles, unfortunately, and find the right spot for it and everything else. So, yeah, that's a big bummer, but we'll get after it. All right, thanks. See you on the next one.